Everyone wants to blame the phone, the endless scroll, the likes, the perfect strangers making you feel small. We have decided that social media made the world lonely. And it definitely did not help. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The loneliness epidemic did not start with Instagram. It started about 150 years ago with an invention everyone celebrated as a miracle of connection. And we never really noticed what it was quietly taking from us. Start with how it feels now. You can reach almost anyone, instantly. Hundreds of contacts in your pocket. Friends scattered across cities and countries, all a tap away. By every measure, you are more connected than any human in history. And yet, somehow, more people report feeling deeply, painfully alone than ever before. Health officials now talk about loneliness not just as a sad feeling, but as a serious public health problem. More connected than ever, lonelier than ever. How can both be true at once? To understand it, you have to go back to the world before any of this existed. And it was a very different world. For almost all of human history, your entire life happened within walking distance. The people you loved, the people you worked with, the people you had known since birth, they were all right there. A few streets away. The next farm over. You could not call anyone because there were no calls. If you wanted to speak to someone, you walked to them and you stood in front of them, face to face. Your whole world was small, dense, and physical. You were surrounded, sometimes suffocatingly so, by the same web of people every single day for your entire life. That world had real downsides. It could be cramped, gossipy, hard to escape. But it had one thing built into it that we have almost completely lost. You were rarely truly alone, because being alone simply was not the default. Connection was not something you had to seek out and schedule. It was the unavoidable texture of daily life. Then, in the 1800s, came an invention that changed everything, and we have been celebrating it ever since. The telephone. For the first time in human history, you could speak to someone without being near them. A voice across a wire. It felt like magic, like the death of distance. And it was, in many ways, one of the great triumphs of human ingenuity. But hidden inside that triumph was a consequence almost no one noticed at the time. The telephone did something subtle but enormous. For the first time, you could move far away from everyone you loved and still stay in touch. Before that, leaving your hometown meant something much closer to a real break. Letters were slow, distance was heavy. So people were more likely to stay near the web of relationships they already had. But once you could call, leaving became easier to survive. You could take the job in the distant city, you could move across the country, and you could tell yourself it was fine because you would still hear their voices on the phone. That single shift, connection without presence, quietly unlocked the great scattering of the modern world. People spread out. Families stretched across vast distances. The tight, dense, walking distance web humans had lived inside for thousands of years began to loosen and thin, and every major invention after the telephone pushed in the same direction. The car let us live even farther from each other, in spread-out suburbs where you might not know a single neighbor. Then the internet. Then the smartphone. Each one offered more connection across more distance, and each one made it easier to live physically apart. This is the part we usually miss. Long before social media existed, before the smartphone, before the internet, before any of the usual villains, researchers were already sounding the alarm. Across decades, they watched something quietly unravel. People were joining fewer clubs, knowing fewer neighbors, belonging to fewer of the local groups that once stitched a community together. The bowling leagues, the church socials, the volunteer groups, the unions. The neighborhood associations, where people simply showed up and saw the same faces week after week, whether they planned to or not. One by one, those threads were going slack. People were spending more and more time alone, inside their own homes, with their own families if they had them, and a glowing television set if they did not. And all of this was already happening before the first smartphone was ever switched on. The loneliness was already rising. The community was already thinning out. So when we blame the device in our pocket for making us lonely, we are pointing at the last domino and ignoring the long line that fell before it. The phone did not start this fire. It walked into a house that had been quietly smoldering for generations and turned up the heat. Because think about what all this technology actually replaced. It replaced presence with a substitute for presence. A voice instead of a person. A text instead of a face. A little heart on a screen instead of a hand on your shoulder. And the cruel part is that the substitute is just good enough to make you feel like you are staying connected, which removes the urgent need to actually go and be with people. Why cross town and sit with a friend when you can send a message in 3 seconds and feel like you kept the bond alive? But you have not fully. Because human beings did not evolve to be nourished by voices, text, and symbols alone. We evolved over millions of years to be fed by physical presence, by the people around us, by being seen in person, by faces that know us. A message can carry information. It cannot fully carry the deep, wordless reassurance of another human being simply being there with you. And so we end up in one of the strangest situations our species has ever faced. Surrounded by connection, starved of presence. 1,000 contacts and no one in the room. That is the epidemic. Not too little contact, too little presence. We traded the dense, unavoidable, in-person web of the old world for a frictionless network of connection at a distance. And we got something that looks like togetherness from the outside, but does not always feed the part of us that actually needs feeding. And this is not just a sad feeling. It is a real danger to the body. In recent years, health officials have begun treating loneliness not as a private sorrow, but as a public health crisis. Chronic loneliness has been linked to higher risks of heart disease, stroke, weakened immunity, and earlier death. Some experts have compared its effect on the body to smoking. Let that sink in. The ache of feeling alone is not only painful, it can physically wear people down, quietly, at the scale of an epidemic. And once you understand where we come from, it makes a terrible kind of sense. For almost the entire span of human existence, being cut off from your group could mean death. A lone human on the ancient plains, with no tribe around them, did not last long. So evolution wired deep into us a powerful alarm, a gnawing, painful signal that fires when we are isolated, designed to drive us back to other people, back to the safety of the group. That alarm is loneliness. It was never a flaw or a weakness. It was a survival mechanism, as essential in its own way as hunger or thirst. But now we live in a world that lets us feel connected while remaining physically apart. And so that ancient alarm keeps ringing. We silence it with another scroll, another message, another face on a screen. But we often never give it the one thing it is actually asking for. The body keeps sounding an alarm that the modern world does not know how to answer. But this story does not have to end in despair, because the same history that explains the problem also points straight at the cure. If loneliness grew from the slow replacement of presence with distance, then the answer is probably not another app, not a better way to connect remotely. The answer is the oldest thing there is: presence. The deliberate, slightly inconvenient act of being physically with other people. It is the thing the old world gave us for free, and the thing the modern world makes us choose on purpose. Showing up. Sitting across a table from someone instead of texting them. Becoming a regular somewhere so the same faces start to know yours. Joining the thing that meets in person, even when staying home is easier. Crossing town for the friend. None of it is high-tech. All of it is the opposite of frictionless. And that friction, the effort of actually being there, may be the very thing connection requires. So do not let the story end with you blaming a screen. The screen is just the latest step in a much longer road. The deeper truth is that over 150 years, we slowly built a world where we could have each other without having to be near each other. And we mistook that for progress without noticing the cost. The miracle was real. We really can reach almost anyone, anywhere, in an instant. That is extraordinary, and it is not going away. But a voice is not a presence. A message is not a face. And no matter how connected the wire, the cable, or the signal makes us, the human heart was built for the person in the room. That is the one thing no invention has ever been able to send down a line. And it may be the one thing we have spent a century and a half slowly forgetting we need.